Hey guys, I'm gonna be talking about what happened 2 days ago to me. I was convinced that I was having a miscarriage because things were not looking good. I was at work and I went to the bathroom and everything was perfectly fine. I go and I sit down on the couch and I felt like I had just peed myself. And I'm like, is this like some weird pregnancy thing? Uh, that I was lucky enough not to have to go through with my first child. It went from just, you know, going to the bathroom, being fine, to peeing myself. And I'm like, well, great, this is embarrassing. My coworker's going to come in and I'm going to be just covered in pee, and this is not going to be fun. Um, so I'm going to the bathroom and I'm like, wow, like this is a lot of pee for someone that just went to the bathroom. How did that happen? And I sit down on the toilet and I look down to assess how much pee I had in my pants because I felt soaked. And it's not pee, it's blood. I am covered in blood. And like I called my husband and I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. You need to get down here right now. And I'm like, what are we gonna do? You're not really ever prepared for a miscarriage, especially at 16 weeks. You think that you usually are like, okay, I'm in the clear, which is why people tell people that they're pregnant typically when they're 12 weeks. And I'm like, oh, 12 weeks because your risk of miscarriage significantly drops. Um, so I'm freaking out, and I tell my husband to come on and get here as fast as he can, which is not great because the roads were kind of icy a little bit. But there's an emergency, and I call my on call and I let them know that I have to leave as soon as my husband gets there because I'm having an emergency. I need to go to the ER. I'm crying, and she's just like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I need to go to the ER." And I get off the phone with her, and I'm just like, I can't just leave all this blood all over the place. Like, I put my pants back on, and I'm bleeding so bad that I'm leaving puddles of blood all over the fucking floor. Sorry, all over the floor. And I just grab a towel and some cleaning solution, and I'm spraying the house, cleaning the couch, the floor, the toilet, which was just drenched in blood, and then I just head outside to wait, and I completely forgot my charger at work in the heat of the moment, which was kind of like the whole time I'm like, dang, I left my charger, but I'm not going back in there. I can't talk to my coworker who was actually outside, and then goes inside. I'm like, I can't go back to the go back into work covered in blood and be like, hey, can I have my charger? No, it was not that important. Um, it took my husband a long time to get there. When he finally did get there, I was in a lot of, not a lot of pain, but I was in some pain. And, like, the bumps in the road hurt. It was not fun. Finally, we get to the hospital. I have to go in by myself so my husband could go park the car. And there was this guy at the door. He didn't look like a doctor or healthcare person. He just looked like a random person. And he's like, "Can I help you?" And I'm just like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And he's just like, "Oh, okay." So he's the person that was just scanning your temperature and giving you another mask. And I'm over here telling him all my freaking business. Um, then I go to the front desk, I tell them the same thing, and I put a towel down and sit down in the lobby. And there were only two people in the lobby. One dude was kind of like upset, and then the other dude was just sleeping. And like, I know that people in the back are doing the best they can. There could be a bunch of people in the hospital as we were sitting there, but it took like 30, 45 minutes maybe Could have been a little bit longer. I don't remember at that time. But it took a little bit of time, and I'm just like, there's nobody here, wondering why it's taking so long, and thinking, every second that is wasted is another second that my baby is dying. And I go, I get called back, and I'm like, I think I'm having a miscarriage. And the lady's like, I think you're right. And I'm like, well, that's not good. I was worried, and now it feels like I definitely am having a miscarriage. Um, she was trying to figure out what to do with me. I told her how far along I am, and she completely butchered how far along I was. Um, I was 15 weeks and 2 days shy of being 16 weeks. And the reason why everybody goes by weeks is because when you're pregnant, doctors go by weeks, they don't go by months. Because a week is more accurate than a month because there are more days or less days in months. So it's easier to just go by weeks. Anyways, um, so she's like, don't sit down. Actually, no, you can have a seat. We should probably get you to labor and delivery. And I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna have to give birth to a passed away baby. Like, that is very traumatic. And so they finally were like, okay, take take her to the labor and delivery, get her a wheelchair, all that jazz. And that wheelchair ride was very uncomfortable. Like, I've had moments where I'm being pushed in a wheelchair when I was having my firstborn, and this dude was just cutting corners really fast. I felt like he was gonna push me into closed doors. Like, there was no chill with that dude. And finally get into labor and delivery. This lady has the same name as one of my best friends. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is a good sign, you know? And she's tried to cheer me up, and I was wearing this over my clothes. And she's just like, now your pants match your jacket. Because I was wearing gray pants, and they were completely covered in blood. And I'm just like, yeah, I guess. And the whole time I'm just like, this isn't good. Until she used the Doppler and I heard the baby's heartbeat. And I'm like, okay, the baby is still alive in there. Maybe something can be done. And, sorry, they order an ultrasound. And I'm just like, I hope everything's okay, but how could it be okay if I'm drenched in blood? And I completely forgot to get my phone back from my son. And it turns out that the nurse brought my purse, which had my phone in it, but she didn't mention it. And so I'm like, can you call my emergency contact so I can speak to my husband and tell him to get a babysitter? Because kids aren't allowed in labor delivery. And the nurse ends up calling someone else, and they're like, oh, her phone is in her purse. And it's like, okay, that would have been very helpful. So we're sitting here scrambling to find a babysitter so he can be in there with me. And honestly, I was in there. It took so long for us to actually find a sitter that by the time my husband made it back to me at the hospital, I was being discharged. But we're ahead of ourselves right now. So the ultrasound tech is doing her thing, and I'm just sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I'm scared, and I'm like, if it's not the baby, my placenta probably detached completely, and either way, it's not good. So she's like showing me the baby on the monitor, and I'm just thinking, this is horrible. Why would you show me the baby if he's not going to make it. This is like terrible. I see a thriving, healthy baby moving around in there, and he's not dying because he's not a viable baby. He's dying because of my body, and he doesn't have any clue what's going on. He's just a thriving baby. And I'm just like, that's even sadder. If it was like, he stopped growing or something, and like it was just meant to be that way, that's one thing. But he is thriving and doing good, but something else went wrong, so he has to pass. That was just a very scary, sad thought. And so she's showing me the baby, and I'm starting to think, she wouldn't be showing me the baby if something bad was happening, so maybe things are okay. And then she turns the screen away from me, and I'm like, oh no, did she find something? And then after everything was done, she's like, good luck. And I'm like, what does that mean? Did you see anything bad and you're like wishing me luck through that? Or what? Just reading into everything. And so the doctor comes in, she's like asking me the same questions repeatedly. Like she'll ask me a series of questions and then stop and go, and then ask me that same series of questions over and over again. Like, um, let's just say, when's your birthday? I give her my birthday and she stops and goes, uh, so when's your birthday? And it was just like, not like she was asking again, like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that, or I immediately forgot after you gave me it. It was more like, I never asked you this at all. At one point in time, she was leaving, and then she stopped and goes, oh, yeah, wait. And then asks me the same exact questions over again. And I'm like, we've been through this. But she's also yawning, and it was probably the end of her shift. She was probably very tired. So she tells me if I was going to be miscarriaging, that I could not leave the hospital. I wouldn't be able to leave the hospital. They'd want me to pass the baby there versus at home. First trimester, you can have a miscarriage and go home. This trimester, you'd have to stay in the hospital and they'd have to assist with it. They said that if, I was miscarriaging, that there would be nothing that they could do to help. The baby is not viable outside of the womb at 16 weeks. Um, the baby wouldn't be viable until I think 23 weeks, and that would still be a very low chance of survival rate. So the baby would be a goner if I was miscarriaging at 16 weeks. She said it didn't look like I was miscarriaging. She has no idea where the blood was coming from. She said if I was miscarriaging that I'd be dilated or starting to have contractions, which I wasn't. Um, the theory is that my placenta just got slightly detached, and that caused all of the bleeding. My placenta was already slightly detached from the beginning of the pregnancy, so I'm not sure if it got bigger or if it just started bleeding out of nowhere, and they couldn't give me any answers to that either. I tried calling my doctor as they advised. I didn't get a response. I emailed my doctor, no response. She's a very popular OBGYN, so I'm not super surprised. Any other time I message, it takes like a week or so for them to actually get back to me. So we'll see what happens later on. But I'm just, I've been afraid to go to the bathroom because all I can think is like, what if I'm like bleeding more, or like, uh, what if I go back to the bed and I lay down and I'm just covered in blood, or sitting down covered in blood. So going to the bathroom has been kind of traumatic. Thinking about returning to work and looking at that couch and thinking about what happened, traumatic, especially if I have to go to the bathroom again, and just like, thinking, okay, if I go number 2, like, is this going to make things worse? And that's also been very scary. All of it just traumatic, just spending an entire day thinking that you have lost your baby to, we don't know why you're bleeding so much or why any of this happened, but your baby's there. Goodbye. Uh, it's just too much. I'm doing a lot better today. Yesterday I was crying still, and today things are a lot better. I'm not in pain. I was sore once all of that was said and done. I was walking slow, walking up and down the stairs very slowly because I was a little sore on the left side. But overall, I've felt the baby move a couple of times, so I'm like, okay, he's in there, he's doing good. And I didn't get any ultrasound pictures, and my poor husband, he's missed every ultrasound except for one, which was the very first one, and we went to Planned Parenthood for this. And the baby wasn't even a baby at that point in time. He was still a little sack in there because I have PCOS and it's hard to get a reading on how far along I am. Well, it was at least from last period. So I was not as far along as speculated because from my last period to what I actually got pregnant, there was actually nothing there, no records, months apart for pregnancy/period. So, based off of my last period, I was a lot further along than when I actually did get pregnant. PCOS is very complicated. So he saw one, he missed the second one because they didn't allow anyone else back there with you. And then this one, which, I mean, in the end, the baby was okay, and it sucks that he had to miss seeing the baby, who got a lot bigger, still kicking around in there, doing good. So hopefully we can take another trip to Planned Parenthood or something, so he can actually see the baby. But anyways, that was me thinking I was having a miscarriage. So thanks for listening to my story, guys.